Journey to God's House, Chapter 8, entitled, It's Great to Be the King. So Brock Talon goes on to talk about a couple of movie references that were popular in the early 80s, early to mid 80s, and one of them was a movie called History of the World Part 1. And in that movie, there was a line that was repeated over and over again, and that was, It's good to be the king. And then he also talks about Monty Python and how him and his crew there at Bethel would use these movie references and kind of make jokes with each other. You know how that goes. So he goes on to talk about the table arrangements, the eating arrangements there at Bethel. Whether you're a temporary worker or a permanent Bethelite, you are assigned a place to eat amongst the hundreds of other Bethelites that are there. And at each table, you have an assigned table head, and that's usually a Bethel elder, which is a little bit different than a regular elder. I guess you could say that's another step up the ladder, you could say. And then you would have a table foot. Usually the brother at the head was a married man, but that doesn't always have to be the case. Neither for the table foot. The table foot's usually an up-and-coming brother. And so they were having a conversation, and because you eat with these people every day for breakfast and lunch, Monday through Friday, you at least want to be on good talking terms with them. There's probably nothing more awkward than having tension at your table. So they were having a discussion, and the table head, he also kind of guides and directs the discussion at the table. It tries to keep things light and on the spiritual side of things, you could say. And so he asked the table what were their thoughts on the weekly Bible reading. And that week, they had read, I believe he says it was Exodus chapter 22. Yeah, I know, you're probably already banging your head on the wall because that's such exciting reading, isn't it? So he asked what they enjoyed about the Bible reading in Exodus chapter 22, and each one goes around and takes the high road and really doesn't say anything out of the norm. And so now it's time for Brock, the new guy at the table, to say what he thought about the weekly Bible reading. And so this brother, the table head, who just so happens to be on the writing committee, which is a big deal. When someone's on the writing committee, they're responsible for dispensing spiritual food to the 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses, or whatever the number was back then. And he goes and talks about him not being anointed and how did that work and so on and so forth. But back to this conversation. So he asked Brock, what did you learn from the Bible reading? And Brock says, well, I found a passage about the law regarding seducing a virgin. Interesting. You know, the guy who seduced a virgin had to pay a bride price for her if the dad found out about it. And as long as she wasn't married or engaged. So the table head, the Bethel elder, keeps prodding. Yes, go on. So Brock epically and classically says, so basically, I learned that if you were an ancient Jew, fornication was okay as long as you can afford it. And you can imagine the gasps, the people from other tables turning around to see who blurted that out. I'm sure there were some giggles and people were laughing underneath their breath. It's a pretty good line. Brock, if you're listening, I'll give you a high five for that. So he mentions that the table head's wife was kind of prodding him and elbowing him to make some sort of response back or scold Brock or something. So he finally says something. He says, okay, that's true. And though they go and change the subject. But what he really wanted to say, the next line was, boy, in those days, it must have been great to be the king. And that would have been epic proportions had he said that. But anyways, this was a real good chapter. Very funny stuff. Brock, keep it up. Enjoyed your book. And stay tuned for the next chapter. Thank you for taking time to listen to my summary of the book, Journey to God's House. Post your comments, like and share this video, subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for the next chapter.